I've been told to stand on here so the people online can see me, so I'll try not to wander off too much. Yeah, thanks, Gloves. Great to be back. Not often I get 2 goes at this, so I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But anyway, yeah, post-live session's a bit tough, so we'll try and keep it fast. But that's what you can't see there is that's the running of bulls in Spain, which sometimes I think farming can be a bit like that. We're sort of hoping we're dressed up nice and hope we're not going to get hit by a horn. So yeah, I guess again, I'm not on my usual topic of genetics, trying to mix it up a bit, but I guess in farming, how can we set ourselves up not to fail? And how can we set ourselves up to succeed rather than sort of aiming to just get through and hope that it's going to rain, hope that the season improves, hope that the price goes up, hope we don't get FMD, hope whatever. And like Tim spoke about before, how do we set ourselves up with a plan? What we want to be doing is acting at the top of the cliff. Once we're down the bottom of the cliff, when we're in that firefighting mode, we're stuffed. There's nothing we can. There's only limited options that we can do once you're off the cliff. And what we need to do is set ourselves up with plans. So plan for success. I've talked about this before. If you measure it, it moves. That's a quote from Jane Riv, who's a Kiwi. But once we start recording stuff, once we start getting a plan on things, it naturally just goes right. I don't know if anyone else had this experience, but when I first found out my wife was pregnant, all you can see all of a sudden is baby seats and prams and stuff that had been in our lives in my life, like it's all been there, but our brain is really good at filtering out stuff that you don't need to know about. So if you haven't got a pregnant wife, you're not worried about baby stuff, you're worried about where the next beer's coming from. But as soon as you have, your whole mindset changes. And that's the same thing with having a plan and a focus and a future focus, is that all of a sudden, all you can see is the thing, and it just naturally starts to move in the direction that you want, almost by luck. But it isn't luck, because our brain, like right now, we're filtering out the fact that it's windy out there, or the bloke next to me's had too much lunch, or whatever. We're having all this stuff that our brain is taking in, but hopefully all you are just focusing on exactly what I'm saying, not all that other stuff. So having a plan is a really key part of being successful. And I think I've got a brother who's farming. He's a breeder. He's very much like me, except he's got red hair, which again is how genetics works. But he's a stock agent as well, and he used to ring me up every now and again and say, I've got a client who's got sheep dying in the paddock. There must be a nutrient deficiency of some description. I'm going, oh yeah, what are they running on? Oh, they're running on a stubble. Oh yeah, where are they in lactation? Oh, they're lambing. I'm like, have they got any feed in the paddock? Oh yeah, not a lot. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not a restriction of a nutrient, that's restriction of energy, of grass, it's vitamin G they need. So we can often we hear these things and we're looking for a silver bullet, but the reality is with a good plan and preventative nutrition and preventative animal health, we can get around that. Yeah, and I guess often we have to act 2 or 3 months before we think we need to act. Before we see that problem, we need to have acted, because we know how sheep behave. If we haven't, once they're down low in condition score, or they've stopped growing, or they're losing weight, it's a big bring back to get them, swing them back up to that positive zone. If you don't let them lose weight in the first place, they're really easy to maintain. Obviously, what we talked about a bit this morning, and you'll continue that theme, is if you've got the right genetics, you're obviously in a good spot in that sense, but you can also manage. All of us aren't blessed with having made good decisions for the last couple of decades on our genetics. We're dealing with different sheep, and so you can manage your way through that. Really critical in poor seasons. It's easy to farm when all is good, but obviously that doesn't happen all the time. And most of the time it's either too wet, too cold, or too dry. Very often, very rarely is it actually optimum. So critical to managing those poor seasons. I have the absolute privilege to work with lots of businesses across Australia and New Zealand. Spend a lot of time in great businesses. We live in a bubble in Next Gen Agri. We work with really good businesses. It's awesome. And when I try to sum up the traits of a good manager, and the ones that we see that insist on a plan and organise the work to fit that plan. Check they have everything to do the job, so they're not the ones that actually get to land marking going, oh shit, we haven't got any rings, or haven't got any tags, or haven't been organised. This is a bit of a self-promotion, but they engage outside service providers, and that's not just their genetics advice. That'll be their agronomist or their or a range of people around them. They get that team around them to make those decisions and help them make those decisions, rather than having to have that all within the business. Really clear communication channels. And so that's something we see in successful businesses where there isn't surprises. Humans don't like surprises, unless they're good ones, and I don't know how many, more often not, they're not so good ones. This is pretty key: accept responsibility and improve. So no one likes to work in a team where someone's blaming everyone in that blame game, and the team is all what it's all about. And flexibility is pretty key in a farming system. So they're just traits that we see in a good manager. So I'm going to talk about the 3 plans that I think you need to have in every business. Tim talked about a 4th plan, which is your animal health plan, or your biosecurity plan. And when Emma gets up here, they'll probably talk about an environmental plan. So there might end up being 5 plans you need to think about for the day, but I'll start with my 3 anyway. The dry season plan. So the good times never last forever, and the later the rain comes, the more stress there is on. So if you're down south, you're waiting for the autumn break every year. Up here, there's different times. It can be dry at different times, but generally we know that's coming. I don't know if anyone thinks we're going to farm in a perfect season for the next couple of decades, but that's not going to happen. Generally, we know that dry times are coming, and so making decisions. And I talked to, can't remember who I was talking to. Hugh Taylor. He's building a drought light right now because he doesn't want to do that when it's dry, because it's too hard to make decisions when it's dry. And that is exactly how you should act. Build for the dry when it's wet, because it's going to happen. We need to get organised and get our plans sorted in the times that we can actually make a good decision. Because when you're in the heat of a drought, all you're doing is looking up there. You're looking at the bureau, and you're hoping that those little clouds might turn up. It's very hard to make a good decision when you're under stress. Humans aren't that great under stress. A few people are, and they tend to be freakish. But all of us, I know myself, when I'm under stress, you just make poor short-term decisions. So making all the decisions about when it's dry, when it's actually not dry, is a really cracking way to do it. So I encourage you to think about how you're going to deal with the next dry times, or it might be the 2 wet times, but having those plans in place, really critical steps. Which ewes are the first ones to go? Which sheep on my farm are going to be the first ones to go when it stops raining? If it hasn't rained by this date, which mob is the next mob going out? If they've all got EIDs in their ear, we know that those ones were wet dry last year, they go out first, or whatever. The more information you've got in your business, the better you can make those decisions. And again, if you've made them before you need to, it's really easy to press the button. And it doesn't matter if you press the button, you sold those sheep, and then it started raining like as soon as you put them on the truck, which I'm sure would have happened to almost everyone in the room. It was still a good decision at the time, and it turned out not to be the right decision, but it doesn't mean it was it doesn't mean it was a bad decision. So you can make, having made good decisions and just make them at the right time. And so again, make a plan for it. So yeah, know which sheep to sell. When it does rain, go really hard, plant more feed than you normally would. Get feed on farm. All the good people I work with that really deal with the seasonal variability have a lot of on-farm storage, because if you need feed, then there's lots of people around you that also need it. This one's massive, and it's really hard it's hard enough to achieve, but adjusting stocking rate to carrying capacity as much as you can. You'll never get that right, because you need a rearview mirror to actually get that right. But when you do the modelling, and we have John Young who works with us as a group, who's an economic modeller, when he does the modelling, if you match you would never actually lose money in a drought if you could match your stocking rate to that time. If you knew what it was going to be, then you would actually not lose money any year. You'd still be profitable every year because you matched well. But the reality is you can't do that, because you don't know when it's going to rain or not. So you have to guess. But what that tells you is, if you're adjusting stocking rate, if you're selling down sheep, then you've got opportunities. One of the things about having the right genetics is that you can bounce back out of that crap year really quickly, because you can sell down. You can do this much better if you've got reproduction on your side. If you've got 130, 140% weaning, you're 1 or 2 years into bang, you're back up to numbers, or 1 year back up to numbers. If you're doing 80%, you're going to be 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old ewes and really struggling to respond to that. You can't flex stocking rate unless you've got reproduction without having to buy and sell, and then that's the biosecurity plan at risk. So having that plan, having the right sheep is really important. This is a really important plan, obviously. This is the only one that I would like to talk about, really, but no, that's not true. A genetic plan is a really key thing to have, and that's what we talk about, a breeding objective or a genetic plan. And it's basically the 5 or 6 traits that you really want to focus on. What do I want to improve with my genetics? Obviously, you can improve other stuff on your farm, but how do I want my next generation of sheep, my next set of lambs, how are they going to be better than the ones I've got on the ground now? And obviously, if you do that flock profile, you get a baseline. But sitting down with everyone involved in your business, working out what we want to improve most, and then, so you might write them down, it might be lambing percentage, and you go, righto, what do I actually want to do? Do I want to have more lambs on the ground, or do I want to have more lambs surviving? And which trait, therefore, am I linking to? So getting 5 traits out, we've got a great template to run you through that process, and if you email me, I'll send it out to you. And it just leads you through a process, and it forces you into 4 categories: traits that make you money, traits that save you time, traits that save you money, and traits that delight a customer. And that's I force you down that line because it's important to have a balanced breeding objective, and that's what that index tool that Henry ran through, that's what we're trying to do there. We're trying to make sure we're not letting anyone just off with, we're going to go high fleece weight, low micron, or simple breeding objectives, because we know that it's more difficult than that. We're in the merino game. If we wanted to do something easy, we'd go and do crossbreeds. Well, I think that's a safe thing to say in this audience. Yeah. And once you know that focus, once you know what you want to improve, then you need a plan to put that into place. You need a plan to make that genetic gain. And so you get this 5 traits focus, and it might be early growth, fat, muscle, worm egg count and dag, for example, or wrinkle or whatever. And then you're righto, where do I go? What am I going to do? How am I going to get my ram selection right? How am I going to get my ewe selection right? Which ewes am I culling? Which rams do I buy, and how am I going to go about that? Which ewes do I select in terms of that young ewe selection? Importantly, which ewes go out the back door? Is it just everything that turns 6-year-old on the farm gets culled? Or is it the ones that are wet dry get culled? Or is it the ewe lambs that didn't get pregnant get culled? And that will change depending on what your plan was and what your objective is. So lots of people sort of are sitting there as those blokes mostly blokes that are crazy enough to stand in front of bulls, are in Spain waiting to see if they get hit or not. We don't want to be like that if we're thinking about our genetics. We don't want to just let chance decide which animals stay on our farms or which animals we bring onto our farms, because we're better than that. Moving off genetics reluctantly, health and nutrition plan. No 2 years are the same. There's never 2 years the same, but the overall plan isn't that different. Once you put the rams in the paddock with the ewes, you've set the time. There's no then surprise that, oh shit, they're lambing, because we knew that 147 days before they're lambing, they got pregnant. And so once we're in control of this calendar, we choose when shearing is, we choose when lambing is, we therefore have an obligation to be ready for it. And we have our obligation to our ewes to actually provide them the energy they require, provide the right animals the right management. So twins lambing and condition score 3.2, and I'll acknowledge that this is tougher the further west you go. When you get out into Dave's sort of country where it's 8,000 acre paddocks or whatever, you can't split up things and can't do all the management stuff. So make this sort of concept fit your farm for sure. I'm not about cookie cutter management. It's about how you optimise your production system. But what we know from the modelling, if you get this, twins lambing condition score 3.2, singles in 2.8, and if anyone's done lifetime ewe management, you'll know that. Then if you hit those targets year in, year out, regardless of the season, you will maximise profitability in that season. And that is independent of year. That's what John Young's modelling has done. Before the micron premium kicked in, half of the money you spent on grain to feed up those twins came straight back into bull check because the fleece weight went up with it. So we know that if you hit these targets every year, then you will optimise your profit in that year. We know that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by planning. That happens by really, really good stringent management. Because what happens if you run those 2 sheep in the same mob? Exactly the opposite. Your twins will lamb in 2.8 and your singles will lamb in 3.2. And you'll lose 15% more lambs in that twin mob than you needed to, and you'll put some of those single bearing ewes at risk of dystocia and lambing trouble. And so you haven't optimised your opportunity. So that's having a plan, and again, you set the plan because you put the rams in the paddock. 2-death weight at joining. It's a thing that absolutely, and if you're mating ewe lambs, it's 2-death, it's weight at ewe lamb joining. You know what your target is. If you don't weigh them, you're just going to get what you get. But we know if you set up those sheep, they're great sheep for the rest of their life. Everyone's had the experience where they've had a group of ewes, they're a bit crap because they were light through as weaners, they went through a tough year, and never really got up to weight, and they were just a pack of scrubbers for that entire time they're on the farm, and you couldn't wait to see the back of them. That all results from you not focusing on, and I know it's a tough year and it was tough, but if we focus on our 2-death weight at joining, if you're not joining ewe lambs, have that number set in your targets. It's 54 kilos or whatever your number is, and then you weigh every month to hit that target. You weigh 50 sheep out of that. If we want to optimise production systems, we need to optimise our management. And the rest of these stuff, feed targets for lambing, getting that right and manipulating that with your time of lambing, worm monitoring, drenching, ram health and vaccinations, all that stuff can be part of that animal health and nutrition plan. Again, if you don't want to write this thing down, get some help to do it. But I think it's pretty critical.
Is that sleeping?
Sorry? Yeah, no, I'm just thinking.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, good.
Oh, we're just waiting.
On that slide, there's a little dot there called ram health. Sorry to make you wait, Hattie. Ram health. What I see on farms is that we can spend all this effort into going out there and finding the right rams, and then we take them home and we run the Hunger Games. We just rack them in a paddock. We call it the ram paddock because that's convenient, and then we just forget about them. They get out there and they kill each other. They get wormy. They get fly struck. They are our rock stars. We've invested a lot of time and effort into them, and I hear people say, "Well, the tough ones will be the ones that we want to keep anyway," or maybe, but maybe not. So we can't afford to have that. You're investing in genetics. You make a lot of effort in choosing who you buy your rams from. You make a lot of effort in which ones you buy. You therefore have an obligation to actually look after those animals. You're not running the Hunger Games. You look after them. You trim the odd foot. You do the things that you wouldn't do in your ewe flock maybe because you're trying to look after that resource. If you let half of them die, or even 10% of them die, ideally, perfect result is you can go into that ram team, do a sire team audit. So you go through them, read their ear tags off their tags, or run them off ideally run their EIDs off. You then go into sheep genetics and you enter all those tag numbers, and this is something we do for clients. You go through, enter all those tag numbers, and you look at their breeding values currently, because that will have changed a bit from when you bought them. And I'm sure Dave does this twice a week or something. And then you're looking at those numbers, and then you can cull the ones that are actually low on data. You're not culling the ones because they broke their leg because they were fighting, or they got fly struck and died. And if the less of those animals that are there, or the more of those animals that are still there, the more you can cull on data, and the less you have to, the less have gone because of basically management that wasn't up to scratch. So look after your ram team. I think that's a pretty key message and part of the health and nutrition plan. Righto. So in terms of, there's not endless money to spend on a farm, obviously, and that's, you're going to hear lots of stuff at these sort of events, and you can't implement them all. But I guess just listing out, when I go around farms, the investments that I think make sense in terms of making our sheep businesses hum. Who owns a set of scales to weigh their sheep? Oh, yeah, pretty good, mostly, good. Condition scoring is awesome for older sheep. Once the sheep hits 12 months of age, you don't need to weigh her ever again, really. Mostly, unless it's a stud sheep and you want to get some of those adult weights, but generally in our commercial sheep, not having to weigh those animals because you can do condition score and you don't need any fancy gear to do that. But for growing young stock, it's absolutely key to get that, because we want targets. We want to say, right, they're going to hit 55 kilos at joining. And we have got no hope of doing that unless we've got scales and we're routinely weighing them. Same with replacement ewes and sale stock. Again, you don't have to have or not again, but for the first time, you don't have to be fancy in this stuff. When I'm talking about investing, and I'm not saying get the best and the fastest and the shiniest, an old set of Rudways that do the job, because you're only weighing small numbers. You're not if you're new to this, they don't have to be fancy. But without them, you're just going to be over and under drenching. You're going to have no idea of your production system. We're running a business. You need to get some weights on those animals. When we're not talking about hours in the yards, we're talking about 50 ewes. 50 ewes in a mob. Conditioner score to weight will tell you the average of the mob, and that's all you need to do. Like, we're not most of the time. That's all you need to do. Water systems, I reckon, are key. The number of people that I see that get in trouble with water is huge. It limits the way you can graze your farm. So whenever you can invest in a water system, I don't know, you talk to someone in the crowd, but having a plan and then just cutting off bits as you go is pretty key focus, because you obviously often can't afford to put good water systems everywhere. But if you know where everything's going, you just knock off bits as you've got a bit of, about June 20 or something, you can order a heap of pipe and have that ready to go in. So you just keep building to that plan. And build it over time, and remember to GPS the pipes, because it's nothing more annoying than hitting them again. But yeah, I reckon investing in water is something I see as critical to farms that change. And I'm off my tape, mate. Sorry, I'm back there. Laneways are awesome, and the more, I guess, in cropping, if you're cropping as well as sheep, this is a bit tougher. But laneways are such huge labour savers. Efficiency of feeding, efficiency of getting animals in and out of yards. Animals that are off feed are costing you money, and so efficient systems that get things to the yards quickly is pretty key. Incorporating tree belts, make those laneways wide. But yeah, the businesses I see that are really getting chasing labour efficiency have a lot of laneway systems. Awesome to see big shiny things being bought, Dave. We're seeing more investment in sheep yards than ever before at the moment. I think again, it's such a difference if you're running your production system and you're expecting your staff to work in a pretty tough, your staff and family normally, to work in a pretty tough environment where everyone is in. I've never heard someone say we shouldn't have invested in new sheep yards. They've always just absolutely loved the new experience of stuff that works. But again, we've got an obligation to keep our animals safe and keep our people safe, and substandard facilities are pretty tough to work in. So make sure you're building into your budgets that we're going to replacing those sheep yards wherever you can. And I think there is a lot of advantage in getting sheep in and out of yards as quick as we can. I reckon in bigger places or places that taking the work to the sheep is a massive potential. A lot of good businesses do this. They don't bring everything to the main set of yards. Half the time you bought the place and the set of yards are at one end of might be 2 or 3 k's or more than that away from where the sheep are. Small sets of out yards where you can just plug in gear. You can plug in your a V machine, or you can plug in your scanner or whatever, and you can just do the work where the sheep are. I reckon that's a really key part, particularly if you want to optimise condition scoring and weighing and that sort of stuff. Belting out there, getting some sheep through a little quick set of yards, get 50 weights and you're done. If you don't have that set of yards and you've got to drag them 4 k's to get the weight, you're just going to say that Ferg bloke's an idiot, I'm not doing it. There's no chance, I can't fit that in my day. But if you take the work to those sheep, there's an opportunity there. Again, being part of or planning for that dry year is having really good feed systems. You'd have a good laugh at the Kiwis when they decide to feed grain. They've got the equivalent of a wheelbarrow that they cruise around and feed their sheep. Because they don't have to do it very often, they're not well set up. They're pretty well set up baleage. But for us, you need to have, for good feeders, feed those sheep efficiencies. Have big feeders that you can get a lot of the grain out to them quickly, because again, that's a labour killer. If you're spending all of your time feeding sheep, you're not investing in the next bits. Obviously, we're in a newly renovated shearing shed, but again, they are going to have to get updated. I get to work on some really good places. We also get to go to some pretty ordinary setups that are looking to change, but make sure we're setting ourselves up for kitchen, toilet, hot water, because we're expecting shearers to come in. It's getting harder and harder, obviously, I don't need to tell you that, but we need to make sure we've got good facilities for people to work in. I'm going to sum up there, but in terms of a summary, measure stuff, benchmark yourselves, your genetics, your sheep, plan for all the stuff that's going to happen, question why you're doing stuff. Think about if I just had none of the infrastructure on this place, none of the people were here, and I just got planted on this place out from the moon, what would I do? How would I manage this place if there was no preconceived ideas about how I should manage it? Question everything around you, and sometimes it's right, but it's still been a good question because it's still making you. And if you don't ask those questions, someone younger than you is going to challenge you at some point anyway. So you may as well get into it and do it yourself. And yeah, celebrate success, and that's enough for me. Thanks team.